We're at the European Business Summit in Brussels, and we're talking with the U.S. Ambassador to the European Union, William Kennard. Welcome to INSEAD Knowledge.
Good to see you, Shelley.
Overall, I think certainly most people here at the conference and in general are concerned about job creation, the recovery, the kind of moribund status in the industrialized world. It tends to be the U.S. and the EU. So how are the U.S. and EU working together, at least on the job creation front, on the recovery front?
Well, you put your finger on one of the most important issues that we're working on with Europe right now, and that is trying to create the conditions for a sustainable economic recovery, because it's the foundation of everything we want to do domestically and internationally. It depends on having a strong economy. So our economies are so intertwined. Our relationship with the EU is our largest economic relationship. It really dwarfs any other relationship on the planet. It's over $4 trillion of investment in trade. It's enormous. And although a number of the things that we both have to do to get our economies going involve domestic policy, there are some things we can do together and are doing together to come up, for example, with ways to identify promising new industries, working together on joint research, areas where we can put our thinking together on standards and interoperability, so that as these industries grow, you don't have incompatible standards. So in the ideal world, you have maybe not perfect harmony, but compatibility. So European and American companies can do business in both markets without dealing with the friction of incompatible regulatory standards. And also, in the ideal world, when Europe and the United States link arms on some of these issues, we set standards for the rest of the world. And that is enormously helpful in terms of allowing our businesses to compete internationally.
Can you give me an example of something in which you feel is working well? I mean, I'm thinking in terms of maybe intellectual property rights or things that are away from the traditional industrial base.
Sure. Well, we are working on intellectual property, and I'll get to that in a minute. But in terms of the industrial side of production, we're working very hard with the European Union now to come up with common standards on what we call e-mobility, which is the next generation of automobiles, smart cars, electric cars. It turns out that there's a lot of things that we can do now as industries are planning to develop these new vehicles to make our standards more compatible. Smart grids is another area. We're working to come up with compatible standards on the production of more energy efficient distribution of power using technology, broadband technology in particular. Now, an IPR, huge issue for us, because it's one of our biggest exports as a country in the United States. Our content, movies, music, it's loved around the world, thank God. And we worry a lot about piracy. Not so much in Europe. It's a problem in some places here, but primarily in other markets, like China being probably a most compelling problem right now because of the growth of that market. So we've worked recently to negotiate an agreement with a number of countries, including Europe, to combat counterfeiting of not only content like films and music, but also all sorts of products that are produced by European companies and American companies and exported around the world.
In terms of, let's look at China just for a second here. The US and the EU are big trading bloc. China is moving in there in every possible suggestion in every possible way. What kind of position can you take vis-a-vis China in bringing it more fully into the world economy as a real player, maybe bringing it out of, more fully into the emerging markets? I mean, what position can you take in terms of China as a business partner, as a trading partner?
Well, China already is a player. I mean, it's the second biggest economy in the world today. And we think that's great. Many people say, well, what are you going to do about the threat from China? This is not a threat. This is wonderful.
So how do you leverage it?
Well, what we leverage it is to work with China and work with the European Union together with China to find ways to ensure that China is a responsible global partner. China's growth has been phenomenal in recent years. It has, in the span of a decade, lifted millions and millions of people out of poverty, which is not only good from a humanitarian standpoint, but it's great for Europe and the US, because those people are, as they move up in the world and become wealthier, they'll buy our products, and that's great for us. So a number of the issues that Europe has with China we share. For example, intellectual property protection that we've talked about before. Also making sure that China is fulfilling its obligations as a WTO member. It's very important, and we have worked with Europe on a few occasions to jointly petition the WTO to ensure that China fulfills its obligations there.
Let me end by asking you, what do you think the biggest, the most important issue that the EU and the US have to face going forward? Something that perhaps worries you?
It's the recovery. It's jobs and economic growth. I mean, we've got to get our economies growing again in a robust way. We have to make sure that we are retooling our economies to drive the production for the next century, and that's energy efficient technologies, it's IT, and all these issues we are stronger if we work together in promoting stronger recovery.
Ambassador Kennard, thank you very much for being with us on INSEAD Knowledge.
Always a pleasure. Thank you. Good to see you.